Hey CLF, thanks for joining us today for another Questions from the Sermons. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about distractions of life. What are the priorities that we should be having? And then, of course, at the very end of it, we're even going to get talking about money during the Christmas season. So stay tuned. Well, hey, CLF, thanks for joining us for a Questions from the Sermons. You have myself. I am Perry Sorensen. I am the Worship and Media Director here at CLF. And then, of course, you have yours truly, the infamous Pastor Dave York, sitting down with us. And folks, the whole reason that we get together is simply to equip you, where we clarify and we discuss everything from last Sunday's sermon. And hopefully this is just a way for you to grow in your faith, as simple as that. So we have your questions that we tackle, and we hope it's a good time for you. So let's hop right in. So Pastor Dave, here we're coming off of, once again, the sermon series, Prophets in Exile, looking at the book of Haggai. And then you had this big idea, which said, God calls us to make his kingdom work a priority in our lives. When we do, he promises to be with us. He's building more than we could ever dream, right? What were some of the big takeaways from that sermon for you?
I think probably the big thing is the fact that we have a tendency to lose sight of the fact that God's doing something in the world. Especially when you get all the challenges that you might face over the last few years with COVID and crazy election stuff and all the things going on internationally. I think our tendency is to forget that God is at work.
Yeah.
And then the other side of it is I think that we have a tendency to get pretty comfortable with where we are. And when we do that, I think that we lose sight of some truly kingdom priorities that God has for us.
Sure.
Obviously, in their situation, it's much easier to see. They lived in paneled houses, and while the house of God was laying undone. For us, it's not nearly as easy to see when you think about the kingdom of God. But yet, you look around the world, and when you look at the decadence in the world, it just reminds you there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. So you had some zingers of quotes this Sunday, if you don't mind me saying so. One of them being this one: "If Satan can't make you bad, he'll make you busy."
Yeah.
And that one stuck with me a little bit. Pastor Dave, what are some of the common ways that you see the enemy distracting the people of God? Maybe even more specifically, just distracting us here at CLF.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, that quote, and I think I said it in the sermon, was given by a friend years ago. There was a guy that was in Roseburg. His name's Bob Nepper. Bob used to be he's a retired pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. He lived in Roseburg, and he went to New Life Christian Center, and he taught at a men's breakfast one time, and that's where that came up. And it always stuck with me because it's a pretty easy quote. If Satan can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And so I think that, we busy ourselves so much. Even to the degree, like I was saying Sunday, that we almost brag or use our busyness as like a subtitle to our life. Hi, my name is Dave York. How are you? I'm very busy.
Yep.
So busy.
Yep. Extremely
busy. Crazy busy.
Yep.
And it's almost like becomes a moniker for us to be like patted on the back and, oh yeah, go you. And yet we don't realize that so much of our busyness may be taking us away from the things that matter the most.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of areas, I just think of parents, because I am one. So becoming so child-centric that our kids' desires, kids' wishes, kids' dreams, kids' hopes, those things become the centerpiece of what we do and why we do it, that no matter what activity that they want to be involved in, we're just in it because we want to be there for our kids. We want them to be involved in things. I think it can happen at work, that we want to be seen as successful, and we busy ourselves to do the extra thing over and over again because we want to have that success. Yeah. And it's like I was telling somebody recently, if you ever spend any time in the hospital, you have a tendency, you're laying in this hospital bed, you got nothing else to do, and you generally turn on the TV, and you're watching the TV. And then you get released from the hospital after, say, a week, and then you suddenly, when you get home, you go, I'm bored, and you just turn on the TV. And it's like that becomes your MO.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what our MO is just being busy.
Yeah.
And we don't take time to breathe and to stop and to consider kingdom priorities and to consider where are we in our lives with kingdom priorities, and where are we missing some things that need to be important to us.
Sure. So take on that one. What are what would you deem as, kind of the top kingdom priorities?
Well, I think first, obviously would be our relationship with the Lord, and that would be, whether or not we're taking time throughout the day to just make sure that that God is the priority of how we do life. And that may be simple things like a spontaneous prayer time. It may be moments that we just set aside. We're going to read a few verses of scripture. It could be that we're listening to something on the road, where we're just turning our attention away from the chaos of the world. And turning it to our relationship with the Lord. Then I think then it would go into our relationship with our family, specifically as a husband and wife, developing their relationship together, and having the priority of engaging that together, and then engaging with our kids if we do have them. If we're single, I think that our relationships are going to matter to us, and our friendships and the people that we care for in the church, and then certainly the church relationships are going to matter. And kingdom priorities about how do I involve myself in my community for the kingdom of God, and serving in my work, in my entertainment, in my recreation, seeing that I'm serving Christ in all those areas. And I think that as you look at life through that lens, that everything I'm doing, I have a priority of representing the King of the kingdom. It completely changes the way that you view how you involve yourself in that activity. It's not just for my kids to have a good time. It's also an opportunity for me and my kid to engage others for the gospel. Those things, that begins to change you.
Well, we've said here before on this in these videos, just talking about being, so how do I take my family and how do I do these basic, just exercises that we have in our daily routines and of life? How do I use that for the gospel? Well, you're saturating your family within the gospel through everything, whether it be prayer or whether you're on a hike and you take, 5 minutes to be like, wow, guys, look at what was created for us to enjoy, while we're here on this earth, just those little snippets, but even those constant distractions, it doesn't have to be like this full intentional time saying, okay, so for an hour of this time, I'm gonna slot this out in my calendar, and I'm gonna do. No, I think even in the most basic sense, it can just be kind of a regular part of your day.
I think it was the same thing with our kids. We have a tendency to think that kingdom priorities with our kids means that we're going to have this set aside family devotional time that we're all going to do, and we're going to sit in, and that may be part of it. But there's also seasons and times of life that it's simply just to say, hey guys, before we get out the door today, let's just stop and pray together. Before we go to bed tonight, let's get together as a family, and we're just going to pray and just ask God to meet us. And we're going to hear from is everybody okay? How are our needs? We've tried to just make the air of our home just be Christ-centric and filled with love, so that our kids know that we're going to have these dialogues. And I mean, it was a conversation I had with my kids Sunday night that I felt like I'd put some kingdom priorities to the side in our home life, and we're trying to just re-engage some of those things. It's just easy to do.
Even for us, when we're on a drive somewhere, it's real easy just to throw on some music and start jamming out or something like that. And even we've tried to make it a habit of, hey, before we even get to that, let's use this as an opportunity. Kids aren't going anywhere, right? They're strapped to the back seat, right? So so hey, here's a perfect opportunity for us to check in with one another, and not just ask certain questions that say, well, how was your day? Good. Okay, well, what was it about today that what was something specific that you learned today? Or in that, what is your favorite subject? Science. Cool. What did you learn in science today? Try and engaging them in some areas like that.
It's good.
You said a quote on Sunday that hit me like a wall, which was, your priorities will become your children's priorities. Now, sometimes I think we can even forget that fact, especially as our kids start to get a little bit older. They're still looking at you, and learning from your example. So the question is just, what are the most misplaced priorities that you see us making?
Well, I mean, I think, like I said, I can only speak for myself, but I mean, sports is it for me. And especially involving myself in coaching in the game of baseball, and I've had to make some pretty serious questions and some decisions based on that, because of not just what I do for a living, but also because of my faith. And so as a family, we have made a decision that anytime our kids are going to be involved in something that might take them away on a Sunday, that we're very explicit and clear with the coach. Can they take my kid knowing that we may miss some Sundays? And if they won't, then we've said that's not the club or the team that we need to be on. If they're willing to work with us, then we're willing to work with them. So I think sports is one. I also think that recreation is one, especially when it comes summer.
Yeah.
Here in Oregon, because we only see the sun, like you said, for 3 days, and we want to be out for those 3 days. And I think that we get to the summer and everybody's off; it's gone. You're done, and so it's like it's like essential freedom now to just go recreate and miss the gathering of the believers, the fellowship of the saints. And what ends up happening in those moments, I think we have to be careful of, is we begin to isolate our souls from other believers, and even in military tactics. Isolation is one of the ways that you pick people off.
Totally.
And I think it's the same way the enemy works in us. You never find Christians in the Bible operate in isolation.
Right.
So I think that's one area. I think those are a couple main ones that like fit in our church.
Sure. That
really become the areas that I think our prayers go. I also think in our, probably in our time, I learned a long time ago that you basically, when you think of time, you take priorities, you think of them like big rocks, and you put those in a jar first. And then you take the lesser priorities and put those in the jar. Yeah. And then you fill it up with the little pebbles, right? Yeah. And I've always thought to myself, God, his kingdom, his church, those are the big priorities, and family. Those are the big priorities. And then there's the other priorities. Those things are going to take it. And then I'll pour in the rest if I got time. Yeah. Well, I think that we in the church do it. I think in our church sometimes our parents and our families do it a little differently. Yeah. They think the big rocks are the things that should be the little rocks. And that's the part that concerns me, I think, because I think we can get our out of bounds there. I think we do the same thing with our money. Yeah.
Pastor Dave, looking at priorities and then teaching our children's priorities and everything, a big one of that should come to mind is just how we spend our money, how we tithe, how we just give, and constantly give to the church and to the care of God's people. Yeah. But it's Christmas season, right? So I think all of us, especially as parents, it's just like our kids ask for something, man, we want to give it to them. Yeah. That's in us. So during the Christmas season, how should a Christian give? How should we combat maybe some contentment during the Christmas season?
Well, I can tell you that one of the things that's really amazing to me, I think it's probably because at the end of the year, but December historically has always been the biggest month of giving, which is amazing to me. Yeah. But I can tell you a few things, and this is something that Jill and I started noticing several years in our life, was we noticed that Christmas had a tendency to take on a life of its own. And then we'd get to January and we'd have this panic like, oh no, what did we spend and what did we do, right? So we did something a little different, and we started, and this is at the advice of an older couple, was we started beginning the end of Christmas, we would start setting aside money every month just for Christmas. Mm-hmm. And it's not much, but it's enough to, when we get to the end, we have a budget number that we say, this is what we're not going to go over. Yeah. And this is how much we've saved. Mm. And then we pay cash for everything. Yeah. Well, what that does is it doesn't affect our tithe. Yeah. See, or our giving. Because we want to be givers. I mean, during the Christmas season, I want to give the Pakistan thing. Sure. I want to give to the church, obviously. Mm-hmm. I want to be on the lookout for other needs that we can give to that people may have needs. I'm like you. I want to give my kids the best stuff, and I want to give my wife the best stuff. Yep. But we save for that stuff. That's one way we have done it. Mm-hmm. If you haven't done that, you're going to always feel that crunch in December and January, like, oh boy, Yep. And generally, historically, you'll find the first 3 months of the next year are the least amount of giving historically in the years. And I think that's due to Christmas. So I think what happens is people are okay with giving during December. It catches them up for the year-end stuff, and they get all their IRS stuff taken care of. Right. Then the beginning of the year hits, all of a sudden they get their credit card statement. They go, oh, crud, what have we done? And then they slide their...
Trim the tree a little
That's
bit.
Right. So we slide their tithe to pay their credit card bill off. Yeah. Instead of, one question I would ask ourselves is, what about a good budget that just says, let's set aside a certain amount for Christmas every year? Yeah. And then you get to the end of the year, there's no stress, and you get to January, there's no stress. They also say that January is the highest month for suicides. Really? And part of the reason they say that is because of so much consumer debt because of the Christmas season, which I think is fascinating. Yeah. So all that to say is, I don't think that you slight yourself in giving. Right. I think that you continue to budget and plan for giving. And I think you budget and plan for all of it. And I think it'll give you a way to kind of get out of that.
With spending during the Christmas season, I think it can bring anxiety, some real concern to some folks. I know something that's been placed in my heart here lately is how can I use this as an actual opportunity to really demonstrate to my kids that my priorities, are first rooted in what God would have them to be,
Sure.
and part of that is, guys, we're not gonna spend as much on Christmas this year because we'd like to buy, a goat or send
Sure.
some jackets to the Pakistan outreach
Right.
and that. But I think it's something that's pretty cool in how we structure things here at CLF and elsewhere. That hey, let's huddle up as a family. What are some sacrifices that we're actually able to go through so we can do this other thing?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you have to think those things through, especially if you're going to give. I mean, anytime you give something, it's taking away from something else.
Yeah,
it's
for
just
sure.
natural.
For sure. That's helpful. One last question, just how do we manage that contentment during the Christmas season?
Well, I think when contentment has to start with the gospel. That Jesus loves us, cares for us more than anybody else in the world ever will, and he has provided for exactly what he believes is best for us.
Yeah.
And I've always been a big believer that if there's something that I want that I don't have, the reason I don't have it is because God thought if I had it, it might destroy me.
Yeah.
That puts things in a completely different category. Yeah. So I may say, boy, I'd really like to have that fancy sports car, right?
Yeah.
And God may say, well, yeah, but if you had that, you'd kill yourself with it.
Yeah.
Right? So I've asked myself that question a lot. So that it kind of settles my heart down on some contentment. God knows perfectly. He provides perfectly. He loves me perfectly. And he knows exactly what I need.
Right.
So then what I do with that is then I lead my family to just be grateful for every gift that they receive. And basically, we've taught our kids that before you get the gift, thank the giver of the gift, and then open the gift and just whatever you've gotten, you're grateful for.
Yeah.
Because that's what God determined that you should get.
Yeah.
Now, granted, we're not going to fill their stockings full of coal and go, see there, that's what you got.
Yeah, sure.
God provided.
Yeah. That could be a different life lesson.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, we are gonna believe that if God is a good God, which we believe He is. Yeah. If I ask for Him for bread, He's not going to give me a stone.
Yeah,
He's going to give me bread.
Very good.
And we're going to believe that He's going to make us content with all the things He's given us.
Yeah. Pastor Dave, thank you for sitting down with us and taking on some of these questions. It's super helpful. Haggai's sermon, phenomenal. If you would allow me to say so. Just thanks for joining us. And then CLF, if you would, send your questions in to church@clfroseburg.com. And even just a side note, they don't necessarily have to be questions that are specifically about the sermon, even if it's anything that has to do with how we do things here at CLF. Why do we have church membership? Anything at all. Just some that came off the top of my head. Go ahead and email that, church@clfroseburg.com. We'd love to talk about that kind of stuff. And then, of course, there is a load of stuff still continuously happening here at the church. So like and subscribe to our channel. It'll keep you updated on videos like these, but we'll also be able to give you little notifications and that kind of thing about events that are coming up in the life of the church. So on that note, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you on Sunday.